Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Brian Farrell. I'm Vice Chair of the Midlothian Federation of Community Councils. Alongside me is a face you may well recognise, Anne Stewart-Comincher, who is Treasurer of the Midlothian Federation of Community Councils and the long-established Chair of Dalkeith and District Community Council. Each of the elected members in the Chamber today will have received an email from me yesterday, including the open letter from the Midlothian Federation of Community Councils. I'd remind you all that that letter was also sent to each of the political representatives who represent Midlothian at various levels of national government. Those of you who sent us considered responses, I thank you. Those of you who sent us a copy and paste, it indicates that you have not read nor taken seriously the concerns that were contained within that letter, and I find that most disappointing. We've just heard from our colleagues in the third sector, and we have a gathering of demonstrators outside the building today. I want to make clear that the Midlothian Federation of Community Councils and our community groups stand shoulder to shoulder with all of these groups. We find the cuts proposed before the meeting today to be unpalatable and unacceptable. We need everyone to recognise that the crisis in local authority funding cannot be solved in this chamber alone. The crisis is born out of three historical facts: the long period of austerity, the council tax freeze, and a funding model through COSLA that is no longer fit for purpose. It is an outrage that in excess of £3 million of council tax revenue raised in this county is sent elsewhere to compensate for underfunding. Local authority funding is in crisis, and the members in this chamber need to consider strongly that they should stand up for the people of Midlothian, irrespective of the colours they stood under, and petition Holyrood and the Cabinet Secretary for Finance and the Cabinet Secretary for Local Government to address the funding crisis that is faced not only here but in the other 31 local authorities in this country. We have severe concerns over the document that is presented before the meeting today. The justification and the impact for the cuts is not properly investigated. In some respects, it is barely investigated. The document is not fit for purpose. It should be thrown in the bin and the entire process started thoroughly. One particular point in that document which made me particularly angry is the realisation that fees levied against house builders for adoption of roads does not meet the costs. How many times, and this is a rhetorical question, Provost, how many times have we had frank conversations and faced budget cuts in this chamber, and yet we are still subsidising private enterprise, which in this case generates profits of 15% on every unit that they sell? It is unacceptable. The fees charged by this authority to private enterprise and commercial operations need to be benchmarked against the fees charged by every other local authority in Scotland. And given that our residents pay the highest council tax in Scotland, the fees should be set at a similar level against private enterprise. We also note that within the document before you there is no indication of looking for efficiency savings within the operation of this authority. It does not take a Philadelphia lawyer to work out that there are substantial efficiencies to be made, particularly in the tracking of requests that come in via the contact centre. And I'm sure any one of us here in the chamber or outside in the street can reference multiple requests through the contact centre for the same service request, because there is no effective means of tracking them and ensuring they are dealt with. I understand that there are moves afoot to address that, but it's too little too late. Members of the Federation are also deeply upset, if not angry, that there has been no consultation so far on the proposed cuts. We want to remind the Chamber of the favourable Audit Scotland report, which particularly praised the close working relationship between the local authority and the Federation of Community Councils. I'd also take this opportunity to remind you that when you came to the community councils during the COVID crisis and asked us to step up and help our communities, the community councils rose to the challenge. And now we are asking, or making clear, that it's time for those in this chamber to stand up for the people of Midlothian and be counted. Our third sector colleagues have spoken about volunteering and the challenges that they face. The document before the meeting today references wishful thinking fantasy that services can be undertaken by volunteers. There isn't the pool of volunteers to take that, and if the local authority doesn't have the funding, where on earth do you expect volunteers to find the funding to maintain, for example, public toilets? We are deeply concerned that the cuts proposed will disproportionately affect the poorest in our society, the unemployed, the low-paid, those with disabilities and those who are elderly. The priorities of this Council are set out to reduce the gap in health and well-being and to reduce the gap in income. The proposals as put before this meeting will drive a coach and horses. Those inequality gaps will not reduce, they will explode. As the very fabric of this building is disintegrating, creating a hazard for the people of Midlothian, the services that are being offered by this county are disintegrating and creating a very real hazard for the people of this county. The cuts are unacceptable. We believe that everyone in this chamber, as an elected representative, and I use that word very carefully, you are elected to represent the people of this county. The elected representatives need to consider carefully their next course of action. The people of Midlothian expect you, irrespective of the colour you stood under, to stand with the people of Midlothian and demand a fairer funding settlement from the Cabinet Secretary for Finance and the Cabinet Secretary for Local Government. This far and no more. No more cuts.